but that's not currently on the table. What we're considering instead are the 4 properties here from 608 to 618 T Street that front on Ellington Plaza. In terms of what we're asking for from the ANC, we've proposed a draft development agreement, which we've sent to Commissioner Chappell, and that development agreement asks for the ANC support with 3 things. First, and I'll get into this in a little bit more detail, we're proposing to preserve the fronts and actually the side of 2 of the buildings here that have been identified as having some important historic elements. We're not in a historic district, the buildings aren't landmarked, but we're going to voluntarily preserve the fronts of those buildings that have some cultural history associated with them. So we'd ask for the ANC's support with that. And then we're going to BCA for 2 minor zoning variances. Both of these zoning variances actually will not be required under the new zoning regulations, but it's still unclear when those are going to be approved. So we figured that we would get the variances anyways. Specifically, the 2 variances are, one is for technically how the height of the building is measured. In this particular zone, the height is measured to the top of the roof. In many other zones, it's measured to the top of the parapet. The parapet is basically the little lip that runs around the edge of the roof. It's typically 1 foot to 18 inches tall. You can do a building without a parapet. However, the city has new green roof requirements, and to do a green roof, you really do need a parapet running around the edge of the building, because otherwise you could have strong wind that could blow the green roof off the roof. So since we have to do the parapet, we're asking to measure the height of the building to the top of the roof as opposed to the top of the parapet. Like I said, that will go away with the new zoning regulations because they're getting rid of that discrepancy. The second minor variance we're asking for is for a loading dock. I'm sure the ANC has heard this before. Any building that's greater than 49 units, we're proposing somewhere between 50 and 60 units, is required to do a loading berth for a tractor-trailer truck. Most buildings do not accommodate that. I think in most cases you don't want a tractor-trailer truck pulling up to the building, so we're asking for a variance from that requirement. We would still have a loading berth and it would accommodate a 30-foot truck, which is a normal moving truck or delivery truck, but it would not be large enough to accommodate the tractor-trailer truck. So those are the 2 variances we're asking for. Briefly, some of the things we've heard and that we've addressed in the community meetings that we've gone to. The first was parking. The very first meeting we went to, the comment was we want your building to have more parking than is required under zoning, and so we're doing that. Right now we're providing about 50% more parking than what zoning requires, and in fact the new zoning regulations would actually require even less parking because we're in the same block as a metro, so compared to that we're providing I think like 80% more parking than would be required. However, as soon as we address that problem parking, another issue comes up, which is traffic. So we heard that 6th Street, the alley serving 6th Street here, so this runs between S and Florida Avenue, that there's a fair amount of congestion in that alley. And it took me a while to figure out what that was all about, because actually when I look at this, it seems like it's really only half an alley in that you don't have houses on the other side. But the warehouse, which I mentioned earlier, has a semi-industrial use in it, and there's apparently a fair amount of truck traffic. It services food carts, so it's pickup trucks towing food carts that come and go from the warehouse. We were proposing originally to put our parking garage entrance on the alley, and what we heard was that could be an issue given the existing congestion. Obviously we can't do anything about the use in the warehouse, but instead what we did was move the entrance to the parking garage to Wilperger Street to get that traffic. It's not going to be a lot of traffic, we're talking about 36 parking spots, but to do what we can to not aggravate the existing issue here. The other thing we've proposed that we've been asked to do and are willing to do in terms of parking and traffic is agree that there will be a limit on the residential parking permits and the visitor parking permits. So we put that in the draft development agreement. Other things we've heard and responded to, obviously the preservation of the two buildings I talked about. 618T, which is the one that held Cecilia's, we would be preserving the front and side along Wiltberger of that building. And then 610T, which it turns out Duke Ellington, before his musical career took off, had a sign painting shop at that building. So we would be preserving the front of that building as well. And we'll do something either on the outside or in the plaza or in the lobby of the building talking about the history of those two buildings. Other things that we wanted to respond to, construction issues were raised. Obviously any development project comes with construction, which can be a headache for existing residents. I had originally proposed moving back the allowed construction start on Saturday from 7 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the morning. When we went to the zoning committee last week, they asked that we do the same on weekdays, so we've agreed to do that and have put it in the draft of the development agreement that we would move that start time back as well. We will, I understand that Commissioner Padro has some suggested language in terms of how we manage the construction. I assume what sort of notices we give, if there has to be a temporary closure of any alley or street or sidewalk. So when we get that language, we're happy to review it and hopefully incorporate that as well. When we last met with the community, there were some questions about shadow studies, and Jeff, the architect, has new shadow studies, which we're happy to show to you in detail. And he'll talk about that when he talks about the design a little bit. But the short answer is that the shadow studies actually come out very well. Because we're setting the building back from the 6th Street homes, and just due to the orientation of the sun, most of the shadows are cast to the north of the building and not to the east to the houses on 6th Street. And then the last thing that we were asked to do, the plaza in front of this building, which was done a few years ago and has the statue of Duke Ellington in the plaza. It hasn't been maintained by the city since it was put in, so we volunteered that as part of the building being developed, we would maintain that plaza going forward. I also think that we plan on doing retail, fronting on the plaza, and I think that will help with the general appearance and people feeling more involved and more like caretakers of the plaza. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff, and he can talk briefly about the designs.
I'll touch briefly on the site plan that Josh was talking about. So, as Josh mentioned, we looked a lot about the loading area because we had the loading and the garage on the same side, on the alley side. We listened to a lot of the neighbors. So we've actually reconfigured it. I think it is to be noted here that we are showing it along the Wiltberger Street. We've got to go to DDOT and make sure that they approve that. So that will require an approval from DDOT. Otherwise, there'll probably be a little change there. And then we kept the loading here, but as opposed to pulling straight in, we're kind of maneuvering the truck that way, and it's a 30-foot bay. It's not a 55-foot loading berth. So when we first started the project, as Josh was mentioning, we kind of struggled, and I think this is about our 5th iteration. So people that have been coming have probably seen a lot of those. When we first started, we were struggling because keeping the one-story building and the 618 here, we were struggling to get the project to work congruently together. The floor heights were different. It was starting to become a lot of ADA issues and how do we structurally have success. So what we've actually done is we've replaced this building and building a new structure at the same scale there. We were very concerned about the pedestrian experience with the plaza there, and we wanted to really activate that along T Street there and the statue. So we actually used an infill piece to recreate that same scale there. And then we wanted to bookend the new construction on the two sides. So you'll see kind of a tower element here and a tower element there. And so what we wanted to do is kind of get the scale right, play off the plaza, set the main facade of the 5 stories above, or 4 stories above, back along T Street and Wilberger Street. So it's set back. It's really about highlighting the pedestrian experience and activating the retail, add more light into the plaza and so forth. And you can kind of see here, actually, a little bit more. Here is a enlarged plan of the first floor, and here is kind of an enlarged plan kind of showing you our approach. We like the randomness and the playfulness of the plaza, the landscape design, and we wanted to kind of capture, activate the plaza itself with the pedestrian experience there. And here you can kind of see we have the retail entrance here, there's 2 retail bays, and then the new building that you see here is the entrance for the residential lobby, so it will be off the plaza in between the 2 retail bays. As Josh had mentioned, when we were looking at this, we were trying to be very sensitive because the site, as it moves, we really wanted to put the height and the density along the T Street, set the building back as far as we could along the 6th Street and the alley side. So we actually have over a 20-foot setback here, and I think from the setback here to the back of the houses is somewhere between 80 and 100 feet to most of the houses along 6th Street. And this is the alley here. So you can see this is the 2nd floor, so you can kind of see how the 2nd floor works with the new construction of the building here, the preserving of this one. And then around the corner, we're saving about 30 feet of the facade around the corner before it goes to new construction on that side. I have an elevation to tell you that. And this is the upper view, so you can kind of get a sense of the setback here along Wilberger Street and T Street. So these are the 2 elevations side by side. So you can kind of see we're wrapping along Wilberger Street. We're picking up the same scale once again for the pedestrian experience there and setting the building back above. And there's a nice reveal here. We're using the tower kind of to bookend the 2 projects on the end, wrapping it with the pedestrian experience. And you can kind of see that here. And scale. And I think the last word to show you guys would be the shadow studies. One more perspective. So there's the existing building there. Here's the shadow studies. As Josh mentioned before, I think when we came before you guys earlier, we actually had the building rotated, so the shadows weren't accurate. But you can kind of see in the morning, the sun's casting the other way, and during the day at 2 p.m., it's mainly along the T Street and the plaza, and then it falls this way. It's not really reaching the houses along 6th Street. So this is June and March. And you can kind of see the 5 p.m. in June. And the last one is kind of the last perspective I'll show there. It kind of shows the overall perspective view. Once again, wrapping, pushing back here, and activating the plaza.
Any questions?
Happy.
Members of the commission, anybody have a question? Yes, sir.
I have a number of questions. I'll try to make it as quick as I can. So I live on Wilberger Street, and the biggest, I don't speak in any official capacity for us 7 residents of Wilberger, but I think all of us are of the same opinion about a number of these issues that I'm going to raise. Actually, the elevation that you just put down, Jeff, would be helpful. To make it real, short and simple, the height of this building it hinders the canyon effect that's already happening on Wilberger Street. So that the 140-plus-year-old houses at the end of this block are 2 stories tall. We're very supportive of all the development that's happened on our street. We've championed it. These buildings dwarf our little buildings, our little residences. We're well aware of, or not well aware, I'm learning that this isn't, that zoning doesn't much help the residents of Wilberger on this issue, that you guys, you don't need relief. You can build this thing you can build this thing this high without asking for relief. But it's a big problem for us. Our building, as you can see, well, maybe you can't see it very well, but the Wonder Bread your building is even going to be taller than the Wonder Bread factory and taller than the Howard. Our street is extraordinarily narrow. When we last talked, you suggested that I take a look at Wallach, the project you did there, and also look at 14th Street. I don't know the exact size of Wallach Street, but in reference to 14th Street, it's about 4 times the width of Wiltberger Street. It's a big problem with noise. So in terms of your development agreement, we would discourage, we really don't want the buildings to be anywhere near this tall. If it were half this height, it would still be a giant pain. It makes it extraordinarily loud. I also learned today, and I know that you're not at the end of the story with where the entrance is located, but there's a big problem, as folks who spend any time on Wiltberger Street know, because of the Howard letting folks out in combination with, although it doesn't, there's a lot of traffic there and a very narrow street, and you're going to add even more traffic onto Wiltberger Street. So we encourage, and I know the folks who live on 6th Street don't want it any more than we do. I'd like the residents of Wiltberger to be part of the process that DDOT goes through, because this doesn't seem to work for us. It's very, very loud where we live, and this is going to make it even louder. And those are the most important things that are issues to us. I have a couple of others, but can you respond to those issues, please?
Well, in terms of height, you're right. We're building what's allowed by zoning. Progression Place, which is the same block a little further east, is I believe 90 feet tall. So there is a stepping down that's occurring, as you and I talked about. I believe Wonder Bread is 68 feet tall. So we're about, you're right, we're a little taller than Wonder Bread, but at 70 feet we're about the same height as Wonder Bread. We're also about, what would you say, Jeff, about 130 feet north of where the houses are on Wiltberger?
Yeah, I mean, at least, maybe more, from the houses
Right.
there.
So, I mean, we do have the entire warehouse that's now in between us and the houses on Wiltberger. I will say that, I mean, for better or worse, because I've heard comments about the warehouse that some people would like it developed because they don't like the industrial use. I've heard from residents on Wiltberger that you would either not like it developed or like it developed to a lower height. I will say that if that property ends up being developed separate from this property, it can't go up as high as this property because it would not have a connection to T Street. So there is some benefit in that now being separate from our project here.
And I think the other thing is that we really try to focus a lot on the pedestrian experience. I mean, we have set the building back along T Street and Wiltberger as much as we could to kind of create that separation so it feels like a 2-story pedestrian experience, and then the mass of the building comes up behind that.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, that's, I'm not sure how successful we're going to be. I just want to, this doesn't work real well for a small but mighty group of 7 residents. And I wouldn't leave a 5-day-old baby at home and wait for 2 hours to talk about this if it wasn't really important to it. Can you talk to us about a little bit in more detail about street closures and construction? As you know, we've got a one-way street. The 22 months that there was construction on it for the Wonder Bread and the Howard were really great that those projects happened, but it really was very challenging. There's only one way, to get in and out of our street, and blocking it is really a challenge. And also, I don't know what the name of this process is called, but when you dig deeper into the foundation, the pounding that goes on did structural damage to some of our homes, and we don't want you to do that.
So,
I've been near there for 25 years, and I've owned on that street for 6 years.
Yeah, I don't like this
you asked about two things. So one, in terms of construction staging, what I think we're going to be able to do is close this alley to do most of our construction work from. So that would mean that we don't have to close this alley and don't have to close Wiltberger. Now, practically speaking, to build the facade along Wiltberger and to build the facade along here, they are going to need some space, but that will be temporary, and I don't think it will require the closure of, the complete closure of both. So we're somewhat fortunate in that we have this alley that only serves the T Street properties, so we can use that to do most of the construction work in terms of the extra space that you need beyond the property in terms of getting materials in and that sort of thing.
Will you guys be doing a traffic survey or traffic study?
I don't know what DDOT will require. Do you know?
They'll require a scoping as part of the BZA process, and that will determine the extent of what they'd like to see for purposes of traffic study and other things. I mean, I suspect that there, given the fact that there isn't a lot of parking variance, there isn't a parking variance involved, and it's just a minor loading variance, that they may not request a full-blown traffic study, but again, that's up to DDOT, and we would, as part of the BZA process, go to them very early on and scope out the details. And basically, DDOT tells you what they want.
Yeah, we know that.
Or what they don't want.
Right, exactly. Kevin, do you have any comments?
No, well, I want to say that Monument Realty has been gone through a lot of iterations with their development plans. They have graciously met with me and the community to discuss their plans with the community. They have changed their plans when concerns were raised, and I know that living in the city that you cannot please everyone, and I'm sorry that there are residents on Wiltberger Street that would like this project to be smaller, but as noted earlier, they're not asking for any zoning relief regarding the height. They're going within the right as a matter of right when it comes to zoning. So the height is in their purview of what they feel that will be advantageous or needed in order to make a profit on this.
I know my only concern, which I mentioned to you guys the other night, and unfortunately, Kevin, you weren't there, trying to restrict who can have a visitor's parking and who can have a residential parking, I think is going to be extremely difficult based on the fact that if you live across the street, you can, and if you live on this side of the street, you can't. I think that's, to me, that's kind of crazy, but I understand that's in the agreement. But I don't see how it can be enforced at all, and I don't see how, putting it in makes a whole lot of sense. That being said, I know you worked very hard on this agreement with Monument, so, I mean, that's just an opinion.
So, I can offer two things. Actually, the DMV is actually using a database of addresses to determine who can get residential parking and who can't. So right now, they are enforcing those restrictions that are being imposed by the zoning commission and the board of zoning adjustment. So, but to Mark's issue about potential damage to historic buildings nearby, there's some language that I'm going to be recommending be added to this agreement related to those kinds of construction management issues that was developed for the Jefferson Marketplace project over in the 1500 block of 7th Street. So I'm hopeful that those issues will be addressed.
Okay, at the committee, at the meeting Thursday night, Tony's already shaking his head. The committee voted to support this project with a vote, I think it was a unanimous vote, right, Tony? Yeah. So Kevin, would you like to
Sure.
make the motion for this?
I move that ANC 6C support the project at 608 to 618 T Street by Monument Realty, and the proposed zoning variances regarding loading and enmeshment of the building height, and it's subject to the entering into of a development agreement as the parties have discussed.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
I have one, request, and it doesn't have to be part of the agreement, but, considering the history of Cecilia's, and the fact that we have plenty of buildings that are named the Ellington throughout the neighborhood, I think it'd be a wonderful tribute if this project was called the Cecilia. Just a comment.
We'll take that into consideration. I know the Boyds would appreciate
I think that's a really nice suggestion, and I think that's, you guys really should very seriously consider that thought. Okay, did we vote? No. I'm lost in space. We have a motion, a second. All in favor of supporting Monument Realty, please signify by saying yay.
Aye.
Aye, yay. Anybody opposed? Okay, the motion is passed, 600.
Thank you.
I promise, Abra people, we're going to get to you very quickly, as a matter of fact, I promise. You're quite welcome. Really have a limited amount of time.
I promise you,
Okay.
I'll be very, very quick.
I only say that because I'm here getting close to the end.
I'm all ready with the same.
Okay,
You know,
while we're doing that,
Don't even bother. Okay. I'm Drew Turner. I'm with Douglas Development. We're doing 655 New York Avenue.
guys,
in
please
square
step
foot.
outside if to have your conversations.
And
Thank you.
We came to the ANC back in June for support of enlarging a building that that we originally had approval on to take over the entire block from just the west parcel to the west and the east, stretching from 7th to 6th Street and New York Avenue and L Street. We've been in pursuit of a tenant to enter this property, and we've now come to an agreement with that tenant, which allows us to move forward. And part of this, originally we had zoning relief on the western portion of the site, and we are going in for a minor modification to incorporate the eastern portion of the building, thus enlarging the building. And we're seeking no additional relief to the relief that we had previously been granted by the BZA. And we're here today to just get the support for submitting the minor modification to incorporate the larger building.
Okay, so this is in my single member district. This is tweaking, as we say, the original discussion. So, and the building, of course, is not changing. So I motion that ANC 6D support Douglas Development's minor modification to the existing zoning relief order 18502 to include the eastern portion of square 450. Douglas Development is seeking no additional relief to the existing BZA order. That is my motion.
Friendly amendment that we communicate that to the Board of Zoning.
Okay.
And I second.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Nobody, so 600.
Should be quick.
Okay, Abra folks, good Lord, we're gonna get to you tonight, I promise. Shook. You are number one on the Abra list.
Appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for making time. I'll be brief, and I love time for questions if you'd like. I come before you to get your support for my application for Class D liquor license for beer and wine for Shook. Shook is a new quick service restaurant or fast casual, whichever your favorite term is, coming to 613 K Street, which is part of this new parcel. It's going to be part of the AAMC building on that commercial block. Shook is a concept that is rooted both in the food and energy and vibrancy of the Middle Eastern market. Shook is the Hebrew word for market, and we are going to be a kind of a healthy, hearty, and 100% plant-based concept. Alcohol, which is limited to beer and wine, don't expect to be more than 10% of our business, given the category of the restaurant is really there to round out the experience and to make us both a lunch and dinner place for the day. So I'll pause here just to be brief and take any questions.
I don't hear any questions, but I can report that the ABC Licensing Committee heard from the applicant at our meeting last Thursday and recommended that the full commission support the application.
This is in my single-member district. It's in one of two historic townhouses at the corner of the AAMC building. If you're familiar with that building, one of those red brick buildings. I make a motion that ANC 6 East support the application of the restaurant to get its liquor license, Class D.
Friendly amendment, and that we submit that recommendation to the Alcoholic Beverage Regulatory Administration and the ABC Board. And I have a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? 600.
Thank you very
And
much.
you're done.
Thanks.
I just need you to sign,
Yes, so I think a couple of omissions maybe transpired in the emails, but
okay, just shoot me an email and we'll get this
I
agreement.
will do that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Texas, Brazil. Oh my God, I bet you think you live here.
Almost. No, but it's been fun. I get the lesser crowd, but it's fun. Well, to make it really quick, my name is Carlos Solarte. I'm the general manager for Texas and Brazil. It's a Brazilian-American churrascaria on 455 Massachusetts Avenue. We've been operating there for 4 months already. We asked for extended hours. Now we're asking to a stipulated license to operate during the time of the placard on those extended hours that it put us. We were for 11 o'clock. Now we're asking for the maximum. Went all the way to the maximum. So we're just asking for your support to be operating during the placard time.
It's a shame we didn't think to tell you to do that when you were here the last month. That just didn't occur to me, and you didn't ask for it, so I feel